Hey folks, Alan Saunders. Welcome to another edition of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm joined as always by Nick Farabaugh. We're talking NFL draft and the Pittsburgh Steelers every day in April leading up to the 2021 NFL draft, which is 2 weeks from Thursday. And today we're going to be talking about some Steelers first round scenarios that involve trading up from their spot at number 24. It's something we've talked a little bit about on the site in our coverage at Pittsburgh Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. And Nick, first of all, just in general to me, it does not seem like trading up is the more realistic of the two options. But just, in general, when you trade up, what are the circumstances when we've seen the Steelers under Kevin Colbert make these trade up moves in the past?
Well, it's been mainly for winning pieces, I guess. Jevin Bush felt like, it felt like the Steelers were an inside linebacker away from, potentially winning the Super Bowl. They had the offense. The secondary finally came together. They had Nelson, Hayden, Hilton, Sutton. They had those pieces. And then it kind of felt like, a safety and inside linebacker. And they obviously rectified both of those issues. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think you can classify maybe not as a trade up, but a similar aggressive move where he filled a big time need. And he felt like they could win now. So I feel like that it went when they are in urgent need of something and they really think that this can help them win either now or in the future. Like I think the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade was a move not just for 2020, but for the future. I think that's when they're trading up. But again, they haven't traded up much. I think, Troy Polamalu was another one where you could see his value. They valued him so highly, and he was going to be such a key piece to what they could do in the future. They went up and got him. So again, he doesn't trade up much. But when he trades up, it's usually a player they really love and someone that's obviously at a big position of need, not just for now, but for the future. And I think Bush, Minkah, Polamalu, even someone, like a Shamarko Thomas at least felt like that because he was Polamalu's successor. And that was a mid-round trade up.
Now, the win now thing is interesting because I think if you ask Kevin Colbert right now, he would tell you that they're trying to win right now. I'm not sure that their chances of doing so are particularly good. I think the last time I saw a betting odd, they were like 33-1 or something like that. I mean, I don't think that most neutral prognosticators would say they're even the first or second best team in their division. But they have a returning quarterback who came back for one more year to try to win the Super Bowl. So this is, at least in their mind, a win now situation, right?
I mean, you would think, but there's been a lot of moves that are very wishy-washy. Like letting Nelson walk didn't really make sense in a win now scenario. Like if you're in a win now scenario, why wouldn't you re-sign Hilton at least in that scenario? Like again, I've talked about this. I feel like they're toting a line between, well, we want to win now, but also we don't. We kind of want to, get going with our rebuild to kind of build around guys like Watt and Minkah and kind of let that start to mature itself. But I think they're trying to at least get Ben, a decently competitive team. I mean, bringing Juju back, making a few signings that are at least addressing depth on a few places.
Right. I mean, they cut Vince Williams and Joe Hayden. They did the voidable years thing with other players. I mean, if they wanted to keep those guys, there's not really a downside to the player for agreeing to those voidable years deals. So, in theory, they could have kept those guys for minimal cap hits this year. If they really wanted to, they could still be here. They could have a much better team than they do right now. It would have come at the expense of the future, obviously. And so I agree with you. It does seem like, yes, they want to win right now, but it's not at all costs. There are certain lines that they've not been willing to cross about how much money they want to push into the future to save this 2021 team. And obviously, when you're talking about trading up, you can trade anything, but usually when you're talking about trading up, you're trading other assets in this or a future draft to move up. And so in this instance, I have to think, given the number of needs they have, they're going to want to prioritize and maximize the number of draft picks they get. I mean, there have been some years when the Steelers come into a draft with minimal needs and you could really see, and there were years where you could see them moving up that they didn't, where you could see, okay, well, they came into this draft with 7 or 8 picks and they only really need whatever, a wide receiver, a tight end, and an outside linebacker. This year they have, I think I counted 15 significant present or future needs on this roster, and they've got 8 draft picks. So, like, I think that is a significant deterrent to any of these trade up moves.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the one trade up move, and we'll talk about this more in depth, that you would make is for a franchise quarterback, because that literally sets the foundation for your future franchise for the next decade plus, right?
So what you're saying there is, like, yes, if you trade a second and a third to move up 10 spots, yeah, that takes away from the assets you can put into the 21 team, but that's a future move, not necessarily a present move.
I mean, listen, and I mean, that's a good move. I mean, if you trade up for your franchise quarterback and only give up your first this year, maybe your second this year, and then your third next year, I mean, that's not a lot to pay, especially if that guy becomes the franchise quarterback. I mean, they're elusive. They're not easy to find. You don't find a lot of franchise quarterbacks. There's maybe 10 to 12 franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's the one asset I think that you could trade up for and comfortably say, well, yeah, we'll do that. Because again, you're not. They've done it before. I mean, they literally did it for Mason Rudolph. I mean, because they believed he could be the quarterback of the future. So I mean, like, it's not crazy to think that if the guy fell, and by the guy I mean Justin Fields, because that's probably their most likely target because they were at his pro day, and obviously the video going around with Tomlin saying, who we came to see. I don't actually think they went to Ohio State to see Justin Fields, but he was a nice sideshow that they could, if they fell in love with enough. I mean Justin Fields, by the way, when I say trade up for a quarterback, I think he's the one guy where they would maybe mortgage for the future, significant capital in the future at that, potentially a future first at that, to get Fields. I think they could do it if they fall in love enough, but we'll see tomorrow how much they actually love Justin Fields when see if they show up at his pro day.
Yeah, and I think we can talk more about Fields. Specifically, that's an interesting scenario. I would be very surprised if he falls. I don't understand this theory that the Niners going to take Mac Jones at number 3. It just doesn't make any sense. Specifically, though, I mean, one of the things we've talked about a lot is that the Steelers, I mean, if you talk about this defense that's going to have Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt and Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt, Devin Bush, theoretically for a number of years, that's not likely to result in a bad team. So even if the Steelers lose Ben Roethlisberger after this year and they do need that franchise quarterback, it's not like you can see this team bottoming out with a top 3 pick with that defense. So if they want to get a franchise quarterback and they want a pick that's going to be in the top 15 picks to get that franchise quarterback, they're more than likely going to have to trade up at some point to make that happen anyway. We've talked about this being a deep quarterback class. I think it may be a bit overrated to me personally, but I do think if a player like Fields or Trey Lance falls to at least the right before New England at 15, I think then it has to start looking like a legitimate possibility for the Steelers. To you, where is the line where trading up for a Fields or a Lance makes sense? Is it 10, 15 picks? Is it more like 5? Where's the line for you?
Well, you're not trading up so much that you trade like 3 firsts, right? I mean, you just
they can't get into the top 10, I don't think.
Like maybe with Denver, depending on what Denver wants. Because again, they've done that in the past with Denver, so maybe there's something there. But you kind of look at the teams there. I mean, maybe Philly wants to move back again if the receivers are gone and the corners are gone. I mean, listen, it's probably got to be at least at 10. But the Cowboys probably won't trade back. I mean, like who from let's go from just a 10 to 14. I mean, you have what? You have the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles, the Chargers, the Vikings. Of those teams, who's going to actually trade back? Like, do any of those seem like trade back teams? Like, because to me, I think the Eagles are going to stay pat and get a corner or a receiver. I think the Giants are going to get an alignment or a receiver. The Cowboys need a corner, like, so bad. the Chargers are going to want their O-lineman to protect Fields, right? And then, I mean, I guess maybe the Vikings. The Vikings are kind of like the Steelers in that they have needs all over the freaking place and could use as much draft capital. The only difference is that they're stuck with Kirk Cousins' contract instead of, Ben's voiding after this year. I don't know. And then you have to figure Fields ain't getting past the Patriots. So, I mean,
or maybe that's the team. I don't know.
Yeah, Belichick trades back all the time. Maybe he does trade back. I don't know. I mean, but I would say I would at least start calling at 10. That's what, or at least at 9. I think I would start calling at 9 because I think the Broncos are a team that could definitely trade back. They feel like a team that doesn't really have for the 9th overall team for where they're picking. They don't really have a big need outside of quarterback, and maybe they would take Fields, obviously. But if they don't like that quarterback there, I think you would definitely call them and see what they want for that 9th overall pick.
Is there a player? I mean, I talked about Lance a bit. Would you move up at all for him, or maybe Mac Jones, or would you consider either of those guys if they got to 24?
I mean, I would trade it for Lance, not as much as I would trade it for Fields. I think you would start considering Lance about 10 picks before, so right before the Patriots, somewhere around there. Now, I wouldn't trade it for Mac Jones. I wouldn't even pick him at 24. Again, I don't think he's a first-round quarterback.
To me, I think Mac Jones falling to 24 is the ultimate trade down scenario, and we'll get to that in another episode. But yeah, I don't think I could see trading up for Jones, and I also don't think I can see personally. I don't see Lance or Fields falling that far. I think they will go pretty early.
You have to think there's teams that are going to want them. I mean, I really don't think Fields gets past 3, first of all. I think the 49ers are going to take him. But then, Lance has to go through Falcons. He has to go through the Panthers. He has to go through the Broncos. He has to go through all these teams, and that's
the
not
Vikings.
The Vikings could. Heck, if he falls to 12, I mean, the Eagles could take him, right? I mean, there's so many teams that could take him. Then that's not even considering a trade up from a team like the Bears or something like that. So
Washington.
Yeah. Oh, Washington's a very much so. Can the Steelers really outbid Washington? Because Washington's at 19, and a team might want to not trade back all the way to 24 because, especially if they're an O-line needy team, like we're talking about with the Vikings or the Chargers or the Giants, or because if you look at those teams, they need O-line, and who's right before the Steelers, the Jets, the Titans, the Colts, all needing O-line. So it's just, I don't know. If they get into a bidding war, I'll just say this. If the Steelers get into a bidding war with Washington, I'll probably put my money on Washington to win that bidding war.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's another thing that's not really being talked about enough when discussing Steelers trade up scenarios is that I think there are other teams with bigger incentives to go up and get those players. New England, we talked about them. It's like, oh, well, what happened? The Steelers would have to trade up to get ahead of New England from 14. Well, there's nothing to stop New England from moving from 15 to 11 to go get a quarterback if they really want one. And I don't think the Steelers can compete with that. Especially because I think New England overall has fewer needs than the Steelers do. And so it's really a less of a big deal for them to expend assets to move up in the draft. So in general, I think trading up is a pretty unlikely scenario, and maybe a Justin Fields falling into their lap is one. Let's talk about some other trade up scenarios, maybe not as far up the board. Are there other players that you could see the Steelers really liking that fall maybe in that 15 to 20 range where they would start to say, okay, this guy's worth moving up a few picks for? Maybe if Kyle Pitts unexpectedly falls, maybe if one of the top rated offensive linemen like Rashad Slater falls, someone like that, Patrick Surtain is one of those guys, someone that you could see the Steelers moving up at least a little bit to go get.
I mean, yeah, it's possible that they could move up for a Slater, a Christian Darrisaw. They could move up for one of the top 3 tackles. I certainly think that if one of Sir Tanner Horn drops far enough, that it's a possibility that they would jump in front of Chicago at 20, maybe trade with the Washington football team at 19. I think that's a possibility. Certainly, I think that you could look at even perhaps just thinking about guys that could drop down the board. If maybe they would think about JOK. I wouldn't surprise me with what he fills. If you kind of look at, maybe they jump 2 spots to just get in front of the Jets at 23, because the Jets feel like a team that could take JOK right before the Steelers do. And we've seen what happens when the Steelers somehow, get tame and they wait. They've gotten sniped of William Jackson III, Darrelle Revis a little bit far back. And their guy's been taken. So maybe they go up to 22 with the Titans. I don't think that would cost much anyways to move up 2 spots to get ahead of the Jets, to get JOK, and for what he brings probably would be worth it. But again, that wouldn't be a significant draft capital investment. So I could see them doing that. But who else would they trade up for?
Well, let's talk about running backs, since that is kind of the big elephant in the room in the draft this year for the Steelers. It seems like they've got to get one. Is there an idea that they might have to move up to get their pick of Harris or Etienne? And is it worthwhile to move up to have one of those guys versus the other?
I feel like it would be a horrific move to trade up for a running back. With all the needs you have, like at O-line, at tight end, at edge, at linebacker, at corner, too many needs. Not for a running back. Come on. Who is Najee or Etienne running behind? Like in that scenario, like you're even to move up 6 spot, because the team that you're moving in front of is Miami, right? Like what other threat do they have to actually take Najee Harris? Who is taking Najee Harris? After signing Connor, I don't think the Cardinals will.
Maybe if like Washington trades up, whoever comes down to 19,
maybe the Broncos in that scenario.
Yeah, like something like that. That's maybe where I'm thinking. I guess the Jets, in theory, need a running back along with a lot of other things.
They could, but let's think about this for a second. Is Najee Harris so much better than Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams?
I think that's the real thing, is that does it matter that much if you don't get your pick of those guys?
I don't think it does. I think Najee's comfortably better than them, but I also don't think he's like so much better where I would be crying on the floor if I didn't get Najee and Etienne was sitting there at 24.
And the other thing is they have so many needs that, like, okay, say Miami takes Harris and Washington, trades with Denver and they take Etienne and both running backs are gone. Well, then like a corner's going to fall or one of the better tackles is going to fall. They have lots and lots of needs. So I don't get the idea that, when you trade up, it's when you have few needs. When you have many needs, you sit or you trade back, because I don't think Javonte Williams is a good pick at 24, but I think he's a fine running back for them. So if they get there and they don't like any of the tackles, then move back 15 spots and make that your first round pick. I don't think that's an issue. In general, I think we've said a lot of words about something I think is very unlikely to happen, but I don't think I would have thought they were very likely to trade up for Devin Bush either. It's just not the Steelers' way. One last thing I'll throw out there in this part of the discussion, even though it's not technically a trade up, but could you see them making a trade that the first round pick is a part of, like Minkah Fitzpatrick? Is there a player on the market that number 24 pick would make sense for, that they could shore up one of these needs, maybe even before they have to look and see how the draft falls?
The one that obviously jumps out is Orlando Brown, but he's a Raven. So are the Ravens really going to move Orlando Brown in the division for the Steelers first? Now, the Steelers might have the best pick that they could offer, but would the Ravens rather trade him to like Tampa Bay or
Kansas City.
yeah, or something like that.
And that's a fairly comparable pick. I mean, not a lot.
It's 131, 132, 130, 129. Are they really going to, would they, I think they would take that over trading him to Pittsburgh.
Right. I think they'd take trading him to Kansas City versus trading him to the Steelers, like the same deal, just to get him out of the division.
Yeah, I think that they would do that. Like other guys who were out there, I mean, they're not trading for Allen Robinson. They don't need
I don't think any of the quarterbacks that have been talked about being traded are going to get traded. But if they were, like, I mean, Russell Wilson would obviously be worth that, right?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, he'd be worth more than that. You know, I mean, there's not. He's kind of the only quarterback that's there right now because we have no idea what's happening with Deshaun Watson. So
yeah, I can't see the Steelers touching that. And Teddy Bridgewater on the market, but obviously not worth that.
Yeah, I mean, so like who? I mean, is there other than there's not a lot of tackles on the market that we know of at least, and I mean, what else is there? I can't think of any significant cornerbacks that are on the market right now in the trade market that would require a first round pick. Now, I mean, that can obviously develop over the next few weeks, but I don't see anyone right now outside of a Russell Wilson. I mean, that would even make sense to me. I mean, maybe Orlando Brown if the Ravens just want the highest pick possible, but I can't.
Or maybe they work some like 3-team magic where the Ravens trade him to somebody else and they arrange the deal through that team. I don't know.
That would make no sense because then I mean it kind of negates the deal, right? I mean, why wouldn't the Steelers would want Orlando Brown?
No, I'm just saying, like, get some other team to trade.
Like a top
Orlando
tackle.
Brown. Somebody did that. I can't remember who that was. Same thing, trying to keep a player out of the division. But I can't see that happening. Have the Ravens trade him to Kansas City, and then the Steelers trade their first to Kansas City for Brown, and they get, Kansas City moves up 7 spots for the trouble, and the Steelers still get the guy they would have paid 24 for anyway.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, and then
that would be a good trade, like that. And that would not be the Steelers' way, but also we've seen some pretty significant departures in their general MOP. It has been different in the last couple of years, and so let's keep our heads on a swivel.
Who knows? But outside of Orlando Brown, I can't see it happening. So.
Well, those are our trade up of the big splash options. I think tomorrow we're going to talk about some trade down options, which I actually think is far more likely and will be far more successful strategy for the Steelers, even though I don't think they're going to do it. I don't know. I just get that sense. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Leave a comment if you got someone who you think is a good trade down fit for the Steelers, and maybe we'll talk about them. And thanks for watching, and make sure to check out all our stuff at SteelersNow.com and the rest of the shows here at the Pittsburgh Sports Live YouTube channel. That's it for today. And for Nick Farabaugh, I'm Alan Saunders, and thanks for watching Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live.